How in the world do you do it, Art? I work hard, just as hard as anyone. I don't know where I'd find time to do any more selling, to get a record like yours.
Well, Jim, just between you and me, I don't like to work too hard. Life's too short. Maybe that's why I do pile up sales fast. I like to find them, make my pitch, and sell them in a hurry, and then move on to the next one. I look at it this way. Every prospect call costs me money because it takes time. Add up my total income and divide it by the number of calls I make, and I can figure out just how much it costs me to talk to a prospect. Now, on every deal I sell, my commission is just so much. If I've used too much time selling and reselling the same prospect, I can lose money, even though I might make the sale. So personally, I don't knock myself out chasing prospects that might liven up after 6 or 7 calls. If I can't sell them on the first 2 or 3 calls, I move on to someone else I can close. In this business, it isn't how hard you work at selling or the number of hours you work that counts. Instead, it's the number of deals you close.
Art, I couldn't agree more with what you say. We all want fast closes, but how do you do it? You're no smarter than I am, and you're certainly not better looking. Tell me, what's your secret?
Secret, Jim? These are my only secrets. Sales tools. My prospect handbook, line folders, data book, and the new X-ray. Believe me, it's a honey. Really makes closing easier.
Oh, come on, Art. I read all those books, too, and I admit they're good. But as far as helping me close, And I know what I'm talking about. I've taken that X-ray home every night for a week running to study it. But I can't memorize all that stuff, all that comparative information. It just won't stick well enough that I can use it in a presentation or a close.
Jim, maybe that's your trouble. You use the book as a reference piece, a textbook. You go through it item by item, trying to learn every fact that's in it. Why, by the time you had it memorized, new models of all the cars would be out, and you'd have to start all over. But I don't use it that way, and the factory didn't design it for that kind of use. The way they intend for you to get the most good out of it is as a sales tool, a prop with your customers, a part of your actual sales presentation, just as your demonstrator is a part. A demonstration gets them thinking new car. Then, when the demonstration is over, I start using the X-ray to help me in my closing attempts. It gets me out of generalities and into specifics in a hurry.
Wait a minute, Art. You use the X-ray after you've demonstrated, not as a presentation piece?
Not always, Jim. You can use it many ways. It's flexible. But one of its best uses is in making objections work for you rather than against you, lead you toward the sale. We all know that an objection is a good sign, not a bad one. Shows the prospect is really interested. When they do raise some objection or other, that sends up a sign to you about the area or areas where there's still doubt. Dispel this doubt, and you can ask for the order and generally get it. Why, just last week, I had a couple of Rambler prospects pretty nearly sold by my demonstration, but I had to call on the X-ray to get me over an objection and into my close.
Well, I'll admit it drives a lot differently than I thought a small car would. Real smooth and peppy. But since we're both going to be using any car we buy, maybe we should buy another Chevy. They've got more room. I'm a pretty big man, and we carry a lot of junk up to the cottage every weekend in the summer.
Mr. McDougal, I can't possibly remember the sizes and dimensions of all the new cars, but I got the dope on all the cars in an X-ray book. Let's check the figures. The X-ray is a pretty painless way to get my prospects into the closing room, Jim. You'll notice I didn't mention writing up a deal at all, just looking at some figures. When McDougal saw the comparative dimensions, he was pretty surprised. I didn't have to memorize any figures, and he got real intrigued when he saw how many times Rambler exceeded the average of all the lower-priced cars. When he was convinced on that score, it wasn't any trick to turn over to the economy story. I knew that would impress him because of these frequent weekend drives he mentioned. Then, since he mentioned they'd both be driving the car, I flipped over to the story on handling ease. I've found that all women are interested in a car that's easy to park. So you see, for his one objection on size, I was able to use the book to give him 3 positive selling points: the answer to size, the economy story, and the maneuverability story. Actually, he was so interested in the book that he would have liked to go through the whole thing, but his wife stopped him, cold.
John, let's get a green one now.
That was my signal that X-ray had done its job. So I got the order, in a hurry, too. And I still don't know how big those seats are. And I don't care as long as I have the X-ray. It helped me close, fast, profitably, by answering objections.
You know, Art, I'm beginning to see where I've been misusing the X-ray, considering it my study book, rather than my customer's comparison book. I suppose that if that lady hadn't asked her husband to buy, that you would have given them the X-ray handout to take home with them and study.
Sure I would have, Jim, but only under these circumstances. I don't use the X-ray handout as just another line folder. I only give it to prospects after I've gone over the big X-ray presentation book with them, for people who want more time to think it over.
Art, you've always been a hot man in the close. I guess you'd consider my specialty as the actual presentation. Do you think the X-ray could improve my presentation?
If you're like me, it could, Jim, because I sometimes have to bring it out in the presentation to cover my own weaknesses, particularly in some of these mechanical things. You see, I'm one of those guys who's in the car business and yet can't even understand the mechanics of a cigarette lighter. I'm no engineer, but a lot of prospects want to talk nuts and bolts. Here again, X-ray helps.
Now, what about this deep coil ride? Is that just another advertising slogan, or do you really have something different? I don't see how one spring can be much longer than another.
I think the pictures in our X-ray can prove that we really have something, Mr. Shields, better than I could. Our springs are longer, definitely. And it's only possible with single-unit construction, the more modern way American Motors builds cars. This construction has several advantages. Let's go over some of them. You see, Jim, every time I refer to the X-ray to prove a point, I can springboard into another point, one that may be hard to explain without it. And I can go on to the next point easily because each subject flows right into the next one. It's of particular value to me when I'm trying to sell a car to someone who hasn't ever owned an AMC product. A lot of the features that we take for granted and might fail to mention are presented dramatically and always told in comparative terms. If you do a good job of putting a non-AMC owner through the facts in this X-ray, he's going to realize that he's been missing an awful lot in his present car. And as you know yourself, whenever you get a prospect all steamed up on the basis of features that he doesn't have at present, that old car seems to get older and older in his mind and less satisfactory. And whenever you can get a prospect to convince himself that his present car really isn't much of a car, you're going to have less trouble selling him on the trade-in allowance for that car. And believe me, that's important in getting those fast closes without a lot of backing. But another use of the X-ray is for the doubting Thomas type of prospect. You know, the guy who thinks everyone's a crook, who doesn't believe anything you say. I had one a couple of weeks ago. A real crank. But there was nothing wrong with his money.
Yeah, I've heard that economy stuff before. And I've heard it said by just about every salesman for every make of car that's out. They all are easy on gas, according to the salesman.
Well, sir, I don't want you to take my word for it. When I say our Rambler's got them all beat on economy, I want you to see the facts and draw your own conclusions. I'm sure you've heard of the mobile gas economy run. Well, in this X-ray book, I have the official results of that run. Look the figures over. And then I'd like to tell you about another test. The coast-to-coast Rambler economy run. It was carefully certified by NASCAR officials. So these are official economy facts you can believe.
Well, I've heard of NASCAR. And maybe you fellows have got something here.
With your knowledge of these testing organizations, You'll probably be interested in some of the other official facts in this book. Let's just spend a few minutes comparing some of the other important. I've found that the perennial skeptic is always impressed by words like official and authoritative and engineering facts, so I mention them a lot. In fact, if you use your X-ray presentation book as a basic sales tool with every prospect to make comparisons, to prove your statements, and to answer objections, you'll bill to your closes faster. And in addition, if you use your X-ray handouts or reprints as convincers for prospects, as food for thought for walkouts or shoppers, you'll get more of them to come back. And of course, if you build a direct mail campaign with your X-ray materials, you'll be bound to whet the appetites of people you've never even met. Turn them into live prospects who will come in to see you to find out more. And by all means, if you include X-ray material with the warranty and owner's manual at new car delivery time, you'll turn the new owner into a salesman for you, because you can bet he'll use it to sell his friends on his new car. If you do these things, you're going to find yourself right up here near me, getting your share. I know that you feel the same way I do, that our cars have so many good, exclusive features in them that everyone would want one if he just knew what he was getting. By using the X-ray faithfully, you can make sure beyond a doubt that your prospects do know. Make sure that you've covered every positive benefit we've got. There's only one thing they forgot when they designed this book.
Forgot? What do you mean, Art? You just about had me convinced that this is the one release that covers everything.
No, Jim. Because it is such an effective salesman, I think they should have built an order blank, a fountain pen, and a phonograph that asks for the order into the back page. That way, we wouldn't have to come in at all. Except on payday, of course.